Welcome to Beneath the Bible, where we're helping you dig deeper and uncover the world beneath the sacred book. Last season on Beneath the Bible, we started by looking at ideas of chaos and order in the ancient world and the Bible, specifically a form called the sea myth. And you can check out those videos here if you want. We're going to kick off this season by looking at what we'll call biblical monsters. Basically, these are mythical creatures or beings that were apparently part of ancient Israel's folklore, but aren't part of the way that we usually understand the Bible today. And when we read about these monsters today, we either miss them in the text or their presence leaves us confused, which leads us to missing the point. In the next couple of weeks, we'll look at some of the biblical monsters you may be more familiar with, like Leviathan. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss it. Today, we're going to look at a few of the minor monsters that make one or two appearances in the Bible, and whose presence you may miss if you don't know what to look for in the text. Let's dig in.
First off is Behemoth. You may have heard this word used before, even just as a synonym for something big or huge. The word itself is Hebrew, so it appears in the Bible like this. It shows up several times in the Old Testament, but it's only transliterated as Behemoth in a couple of places. In places like Deuteronomy 32 and Job 12, it's translated as wild beasts. In Isaiah 30, it's just translated animals. In Psalm 73, it's characterized as stupid and ignorant. The only place it's translated as Behemoth is in Job 40, and this is where our clearest description of this creature comes from. It feeds on grass, it is exceedingly strong, has a long tail like a cedar. Its limbs and stomach are like bronze and iron. It's called the first of God's works. It seems to be found in marshy areas near a river, but it's not worried by a strong current. And the image is that of a large, maybe oversized, four-legged creature that is incredibly strong, that lives near the river, and may also be noted for its procreative features. Since at least the 1600s, people have been guessing what this creature might be. For a long time, it was thought to be an elephant, but that interpretation is now widely rejected. Hippopotamus was and is still often cited as another option. Water buffaloes, rhinoceros, and even dinosaurs have been suggested. Something that the author of Job made it up, or that Behemoth is a stand-in for a nation, kind of how Daniel uses various beasts to represent various empires. But the Hebrew word gives us a clue. The word behemoth as it appears in the Bible is the intensive feminine plural form of the word behemu, which means beast or ox. The word is feminine in form, but grammatically in Job it is masculine. That is, the modifying words are masculine singular. So it appears behemoth is a proper name of a male creature, likely an ox or bull of mythic proportions. Behemoth is not mentioned outside the Bible by the name behemoth, but there are several creatures in ancient Near Eastern mythology that exhibit interesting parallels with behemoth. An obvious one is the bull of heaven that appears in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the story, Gilgamesh and his friend Enkidu defeat the bull of heaven that Ishtar has released on the land. The bull is huge and with a single breath kills hundreds of men. Gilgamesh was only 1/3 human and 2/3 divine, so he and Enkidu were able to overcome the massive bull through great effort. They kill it, but because it was sacred, the gods determined one of the men who killed it must die, so Enkidu is killed. Other scholars have suggested the so-called bull men of Mesopotamian art serve as parallels with Behemoth. And these figures have a human head and torso with bull horns and legs. They appear on seals from as early as the early dynastic period, so the bullman figure is incredibly old. The bullmen were associated with the mountainous regions on the outskirts of the ordered world and could be seen as representing the chaotic wilderness. Since they were found in the mountains at the edge of the world, they were sometimes associated with supporting the wings of the solar disk. And while it's tempting to see these as a parallel with Behemoth, a lot of the details don't fit, so this interpretation doesn't really work once you examine it really closely. Instead of Mesopotamian parallels, the scholar John Day has cited a parallel from Ugaritic. In Ugaritic myth, there's a colossal bull beast that has a similar literary context as Behemoth. The creature is called in one text Arsh and El's calf Attic, and in that text, the goddess Anat says she smote Arsh, beloved of El, and I put an end to El's calf Attic. Another text states, in the sea are Ars and the dragon. May Kothar Harhassus drive them away. May Kothar Harhassus cut them off. In the next couple of weeks, we will talk about Leviathan, but for now, I'll just add that the Ugaritic parallel of Leviathan is mentioned in the same passage, of Anat saying she defeated Ars, beloved of El. So Ars or Arsh is associated with Leviathan in the sea. It's called a calf, beloved of El, a deity frequently associated with the bull. So if there is a parallel outside the Bible for Behemoth, it seems that this is the best bet.
Next is a biblical monster you may not be very familiar with. I hadn't heard of it until we started doing some research for this video. Now, the name of this monster is Ziz. So if Behemoth is a bull and powerful on land, and Leviathan is the penultimate sea creature, then Ziz is the master of the air. Now, Ziz only appears in two passages, Psalm 50 and Psalm 80. In Psalm 50, your translation may say something like, "I know every bird in the mountains, and the insects in the fields are mine." Now, in the second clause, in the Hebrew, this says, "V'ziz sadeh imadi." So Psalm 50 is read more like, "I know every bird in the mountains, and Ziz sadeh is mine." Now, the parallelism works a lot better if we understand Ziz sadeh as a mythical bird. Ziz is often translated as everything moving in the fields because Ziz is taken to come from a Hebrew root meaning to move, and it's an onomatopoeia for a fly buzzing. But it makes better sense to me if we see Ziz as the name of the creature and Sadeh having its usual meaning of field, highland, or mountain. Now, this renders the line as Ziz of the wilderness or mountain. Behemoth also appears in Psalm 50 in the prior verse, so it's not hard to see that Ziz is also in parallel with Behemoth, who, as we just saw, is a mythic bull creature. And we see this creature Ziz Sadeh in Psalm 80 as well. In verse 13 it says, "The boar in the forest eats it away, and Ziz Sadeh feeds on it." Now, the Bible says literally nothing else about this, and it's not obvious what the original audience would have imagined this creature to be. But in the Jewish rabbinic tradition, Ziz is a colossal bird, or perhaps an avian composite creature like a griffin. Some link it to the phoenix of Greek mythology, or the Anzu bird in Mesopotamian mythology. Anzu was a composite creature, an eagle with a lion's head. It lived in the mountains, and it nested in a giant tree. It would eat wild bulls and give them to its young. Its wings could cause sandstorms and whirlwinds. So the Anzu bird is likely what the Israelites are drawing on or imagining with the creature Ziz. And this influence is more clear in the rabbinic sources than in the Bible. For example, Ziz could darken the sky with its feathers if it spread out its wings, just like Anzu. There's a particularly colorful story in Jewish tradition that some sailors saw Ziz in the water with its feet barely covered by the water and its head in the sky. And they thought the water was surely shallow, but a heavenly voice warned them that once a carpenter's axe slipped from his hands at this spot, and it took 7 years to reach the bottom. So the colossal bird was standing in impossibly deep water that barely covered its feet. And finally, according to tradition, Ziz and Leviathan will both be served as delicacies on which the pious will feast at the end of days. Wonder if it tastes like chicken.
There's one more possible biblical monster I want to mention. The existence of this one is more speculative and probably not accurate, but it's interesting nonetheless. Mary Wickman argues that the Bible draws on Baalistic imagery and uses monsters known from Baalistic literature, like Leviathan, and as we just saw, a type of behemoth. There are other monsters or gods from Ugaritic that also show up in the Bible. She posits that since Mot, the god of death and the underworld, features so prominently in the Baal cycle, we might expect to see an underworld or otherwise chthonic deity or figure in the Bible. She suggests that Eretz may fit this role. This word is usually translated earth and isn't given any creaturely or personified qualities, but Wickman thinks we should see this word differently. She looks at passages like Exodus 15:12 with Eretz swallowing Pharaoh and Psalm 114 where Eretz trembles as Mot did before Baal was confirmed as sovereign. And in fact, in several Psalms, Eretz melts or shakes at the sovereignty of God. So is Eretz an earth monster that is similar to Mot? Well, while this possibility is intriguing, it seems to us that this theory is too speculative to be accepted without further evidence. And most of the cases Wickman cites work just as well as when Eretz is understood or translated as simply earth, as it usually is.
So, why does all this stuff about biblical monsters matter? Well, I think that as we saw in our Supernatural World series, which you can check out here, understanding the way the ancient Israelites saw their world helps us be better readers of the Bible, even if it doesn't radically alter the way we interpret it. In fact, I would say that faithful biblical interpretation doesn't depend on gaining a body of esoteric knowledge, but gaining some of that knowledge certainly makes the text more interesting, and it gives us insight into what the original authors and readers were thinking. The world of the ancient Israelites was filled with supernatural and mythical creatures that we often misunderstand or completely miss. We don't have to accept a belief in those same creatures in order to be faithful readers of Scripture, but it does help to know what's really going on in the text. At the same time, not everything in the ancient Israelite worldview had supernatural or mythic qualities, so we need to be careful in how we assign those qualities as we read the Bible. In the next couple of weeks, we'll look at some biblical monsters whose presence does have an impact on how we read the text, and we can't wait to dig into it with you. Thanks for joining us for this Beneath the Bible video. If you liked what you saw, be sure to hit the like button and share this video with your friends. Also subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming series. And you can also follow us on social media, on Twitter and Facebook at Beneath the Bible. Until next time, keep digging.